I never thought a normal afternoon in my own home could spiral into chaos. But when you live in a neighborhood with an HOA Karen, peace never lasts long. It all started with a knock. A heavy, sharp knock on my door, the kind that doesn't just ask you to open, it demands it. I was in the living room sipping coffee, scrolling through my phone when I froze. Because I already knew who it was. Karen. The same Karen who had been harassing us ever since we moved in. She hated our fence color. She hated our flowers. She even hated the way my wife parked the car. Straight, neat, perfectly within the lines. But in her eyes, we were somehow destroying the neighborhood's image. I peeked through the blinds. And there she was in her usual uniform. Oversized sunglasses, clipboard in hand, lips pursed so tight it looked like she was sucking on a lemon. Her phone was clutched in her right hand, and I swear I saw her thumb hovering over the screen like she was ready to dial. I didn't open the door. Because with Karen, the second you give her attention, she takes it as permission to invade your life. A few minutes passed. She knocked again, louder this time. Then silence. That silence was worse. Because Karen in silence meant Karen was plotting. I went upstairs to tell my wife, Sarah. She was in the office, typing away at her computer, lost in her work. She barely looked up when I said, "She's outside again." Sarah sighed like she'd been expecting this all along. "What is it this time? Our mailbox is an inch too high? Or the flowers aren't regulation tulips?" I chuckled, but before I could answer we both heard it. Her voice. "Is angry." Talking fast into the phone. We looked at each other. And Sarah's eyes went wide. "She's calling 911. At first I thought, no she wouldn't. But then I heard it clearly through the window. "Yes, hello, I'd like to report a situation. My neighbors are refusing to let me inspect their property, and I think something suspicious is going on inside." My blood boiled. Refusing to let her in? Inspect our property? Who did she think she was? Law enforcement. I whispered, "She's trying to use the cops to break in." And that's when Sarah did something I'll never forget. She grabbed her phone. And she smiled. You see, Sarah isn't just anyone. She works as a dispatcher. She takes calls from people all day long, handling emergencies, directing police, fire, and medical units. She knows the system inside and out. And sometimes, when calls get rerouted or when she's on shift covering the neighborhood, guess whose voice the 911 line goes to? Hers. She whispered, "If she's calling 911, I might just be the one to answer." I swear time stopped. Because in that moment, Karen had no idea she was walking straight into a trap she set for herself. The knock stopped. The yelling stopped. And we knew Karen had gone back to her car to make her full report. Sarah's phone buzzed. She looked at me, her eyes sparkling with both disbelief and amusement. "It's her." She picked up the headset, steadying her voice into her professional calm dispatcher tone. 911, what's your emergency?" And sure enough, Karen's voice screeched through the line. "Yes, finally. I need help immediately. My neighbors are refusing to comply with HOA rules, and I demand that an officer come force them to let me in." Sarah bit her lip to keep from laughing. Her eyes met mine and she mouthed the words, "Oh, this is going to be fun." But she didn't laugh into the phone. Her voice stayed smooth, calm, professional. "Ma'am, can you clarify, are you saying your neighbors committed a crime? Or is this about HOA rules?" Karen snapped back, "Of course it's a crime. They're hiding something. I know it. Probably drugs or something illegal. Why else wouldn't they let me in?" I had to cover my mouth to stop myself from laughing. This woman truly thought she had the authority to just barge into our home. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her dispatcher instincts kicking in. "Ma'am, refusing to allow you into their private residence is not a crime. Are you in any immediate danger?" Karen gasped as if she'd been slapped. "Excuse me? I am the HOA president. That gives me authority." Sarah's eyebrow twitched, but she didn't break character. "Ma'am, the HOA does not grant you legal authority to enter someone's home. Unless you are witnessing a life-threatening emergency, this does not qualify as a 911 call." There was silence on the other end. Then the hiss of pure rage. "You don't understand. They're dangerous people. You need to send someone now or I will hold you responsible." Sarah smiled. And in her calmest voice she said, "Ma'am, are you threatening a 911 dispatcher?" The silence that followed was golden. Karen stuttered, backpedaling. I didn't mean it like that, I'm just saying." Sarah cut her off. "Ma'am, misuse of emergency services is a serious offense. I'm going to need your full name and location." Karen proudly announced her name, not realizing she'd just given Sarah everything she needed. I whispered, "You're setting her up." Sarah just nodded, still holding the phone to her ear. "This call is being recorded, ma'am. And since you've admitted this is an HOA dispute and not an emergency, I'm required to escalate this as a false report." Karen's voice cracked. "What? No. You can't do that. I pay taxes. I demand the police show up and teach these neighbors a lesson." Sarah's voice dropped lower, steady and sharp. "Ma'am, the only person in danger of a lesson here is you." I swear I saw Karen through the blinds, pacing by her car, waving her arms in fury as she argued with Sarah, completely unaware she was talking directly to the very neighbor she hated most. And this was only the beginning. Because Sarah wasn't just going to let her walk away from this stunt. She was already pulling strings, documenting the false call, marking the location and flagging Karen's name for officers. Karen thought she could weaponize the police to force her way in. But thanks to Sarah, she had just called the cops on herself. I thought the call would be the end of it. Sarah had done her part. She flagged the call, she documented Karen's lies, and she made sure the record was airtight. But Karen wasn't done. Not by a long shot. From the window, I could see her pacing, her sunglasses perched on her head now, her hair frazzled, one hand still clutching the phone while the other gestured wildly as if she was talking to an invisible audience. She looked like a politician trying to win votes on the sidewalk. "She's not letting it go," I muttered. Sarah shook her head with a little laugh. "Of course not. Karen doesn't know how to lose quietly. She's the type who would rather set herself on fire if it means you'll feel a little smoke." I sat down at the edge of Sarah's desk, still watching from the corner of the blinds. "What happens next?" I asked. She leaned back in her chair, smirking. "Well, if she keeps demanding officers, guess what? She's getting officers. Only this time they'll know she made a false report. They're not coming here for us. They're coming here for her." That thought sent a thrill down my spine. 4 months, Karen had walked around this neighborhood acting like she was untouchable. She handed out warnings like she was the sheriff of some old western town. She fined people for leaving trash cans out 10 minutes too long. She even scolded a teenager for riding his bike too fast on the sidewalk. And now, for once, someone was finally going to hold her accountable. I could hear her muffled voice again outside. She was yelling into her phone. The words carried through the air, shrill and piercing. "Yes, I demand an officer come now. My neighbors are dangerous. They threaten me. They won't let me in." I turned to Sarah, raising an eyebrow. "Threatened her? We didn't even open the door." Sarah shrugged. "She's trying to build her fantasy case. The more dramatic she sounds, the more she thinks people will believe her." It was laughable but also infuriating. Because if Sarah hadn't been the one to take that call, if it had gone to a different dispatcher who didn't know the history, maybe, just maybe, someone would have believed Karen. Maybe officers would have shown up on our doorstep ready to assume we were the bad guys. That was the scariest part. But this time luck was on our side. About 20 minutes later I heard it. The low hum of engines. Tires crunching against pavement. 2 patrol cars rolled slowly down the street, their lights flicking once before shutting off. Not racing, not sirens blaring. Calm. Controlled. They knew this wasn't the emergency Karen had sold it to be. Karen, of course, went running. She waved her arms in the air like she was signaling a rescue chopper, pointing wildly at our house, then clutching her chest as though she'd survived some great danger. The officers stepped out, tall and steady, their expressions unreadable. One of them was a woman with her hair tied back in a neat bun. The other was a broad-shouldered man with the kind of calm posture that made it clear he'd seen every kind of nonsense before. Karen wasted no time. "Officers. Finally. You have to do something about them. They're refusing inspection, they're hiding illegal activity, they're dangerous." The officers didn't even glance at us. They just looked at her. The woman spoke first. "Ma'am, we received your call. Can you clarify exactly what crime you're reporting?" Karen's hands flew to her hips. "Isn't it obvious? They won't let me in their home. I'm the HOA president. That gives me authority over inspections." The male officer's eyebrow twitched just slightly. "Ma'am, refusing to let you into their home is not a crime." I swear I could see the exact second Karen's confidence cracked. But, in true Karen fashion, she tried to double down. "They're hiding something. No one refuses the HOA unless they're guilty. You have to force them to let me inside." The officers exchanged a glance, and that glance said everything. They dealt with her type before. They already knew. The female officer crossed her arms. "Ma'am, the 911 system is for emergencies, not HOA disputes. Do you understand that?" Karen's face turned red. This is an emergency. Our property values are at stake. That's an emergency. At that moment, Sarah stepped up beside me, standing near the window where she could watch. Her arms were folded, a sly smile on her face. She whispered just loud enough for me to hear. She just called her property value an emergency. That's going on the record. The officers started writing notes. Karen noticed and grew even more frantic. Why are you writing things down? You should be going to their door. You should be demanding they open up. What kind of useless police are you if you can't even enforce the rules? The male officer finally spoke again, and this time his voice carried a sharp edge. Ma'am, we're writing this down because making a false 911 call is a criminal offense. You said your neighbors threatened you. Did they? Karen froze. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Well, they didn't say it to my face, but I know they're dangerous. Look at them. Look at the way they hide behind the curtains. They're plotting against me. I almost laughed out loud, but I held it in. The female officer shook her head slowly. Ma'am, unless you can provide evidence of a crime, what you've done today is file a false report. That's a misuse of emergency services. We could cite you or worse. Karen sputtered, pointing toward our house again. You can't take their side. I am the HO. I represent this community. If you don't act, then this entire neighborhood will fall apart. The officers didn't flinch. They didn't even look at our house. Their entire focus was on her, and she was unraveling by the second. Sarah leaned closer to me and whispered, Watch. They're not here for us anymore. They're circling her. And she was right. The male officer asked for her full name and ID. She practically shoved her wallet into his chest, muttering about how, this is ridiculous, and you'll all regret ignoring me. He read the ID, wrote it down, and handed it back. Then he spoke, slow and steady. Ma'am, this is your only warning. If you call 911 again for non-emergencies, you will be arrested. Do you understand? Her jaw dropped. Arrested? Me? You're threatening to arrest me? I called you for help. The female officer's voice was even firmer. No, ma'am. You called us to settle an HOA dispute. That is not our job. If you can't understand that, then maybe spending a night in holding would help you think it through. Karen's face went pale. For the first time since we'd moved here, I saw her deflate. Not defeated yet, but shaken. She tried one last desperate angle. But they're dangerous. My life is in danger. You can't leave me here with them. The male officer tilted his head. Are you in immediate danger, ma'am? Karen's lips trembled. Well, not immediate, but... Then this conversation is over. It was like a gavel had slammed down in a courtroom. Final. Unshakable. Karen stood frozen as the officers turned back toward their cars. She reached out a hand as if to grab their attention, but they didn't look back. They didn't need to. And from our window, Sarah smiled wider than I'd ever seen her smile. She thought she could weaponize the system. Instead, she just got put on their radar. I whispered, So what happens now? Sarah tapped her phone. They already flagged her. Every dispatcher in this county is going to know her name. If she tries this again, she won't get a warning. She'll get handcuffs. I let that sink in. For months, Karen had made our lives miserable. But now she was the one walking on thin ice. The sight of her standing alone in the street, muttering to herself as the patrol cars pulled away, was a picture I would never forget. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Because Karen wasn't the type to give up after one failed attempt. She was the type to come back swinging, louder and crazier than before. But what she didn't know was that Sarah was ready for her. Every move she made, every lie she told, every stunt she tried to pull, Sarah would be 3 steps ahead. And sooner or later, Karen's own tricks would land her exactly where she belonged. Behind bars. After the officers left that afternoon, I thought maybe, just maybe, Karen would finally back off. She had been humiliated right there in front of her precious clipboard and her imaginary authority. She had been warned, written down, and flagged. That should have been enough to scare her into silence. But with Karen, fear and shame don't work the way they do with normal people. For her, humiliation was just gasoline. And in the days that followed, she proved it. The very next morning, there she was. Standing at the edge of our driveway like a scarecrow with a mission. Sunglasses back on, clipboard ready, muttering to herself while writing down who knows what about our property. Sarah watched her through the blinds, sipping her tea like it was a morning show. She's keeping score, she said, her voice calm. Trying to build her little case. It won't matter. I frowned. You're sure she won't try 911 again? Sarah smirked. She's too stubborn not to. And she was right. 3 days later it happened. We were eating dinner when the knock came again. Loud. Aggressive. Insistent. Sarah set down her fork, already rolling her eyes. She's back. I opened the door just a crack. And there she stood, her face flushed, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. You've ignored every single violation I've documented. The weeds in your side yard, the color of your shutters, even the height of your grass. If you don't let me inside to inspect immediately, I will call 911 again. I laughed out loud. I couldn't help it. Karen, you can't just barge into people's homes. It's illegal. Her lips tightened into that familiar lemon-sucking expression. Illegal? I represent this neighborhood. You are required to comply. Sarah stepped up beside me then, her arms crossed, her presence calm but firm. Karen, you already tried this once. Do you really want to test how forgiving the officers will be the second time? That stopped her, but only for a second. Her eyes narrowed and she jabbed a finger towards Sarah. You think you're so clever? But the rules are the rules. I don't care if it takes all night, I'll have the police here again, and this time they'll drag you out if they have to. Sarah tilted her head slightly, like she was studying a wild animal. Go ahead. Call. Karen blinked. She hadn't expected that. You think I won't? Sarah smiled. No. I think you will. And I think you'll regret it. Karen's face turned crimson. She spun on her heel and stormed down the driveway, pulling out her phone as she went. I looked at Sarah, uneasy. Are you sure this is smart? Her eyes gleamed. It's not just smart. It's checkmate. And just like before, Sarah's phone buzzed a few minutes later. She glanced at the screen, then back at me. It's her again. She slipped on her headset, her tone transforming into that steady dispatcher calm. 911, what's your emergency? Karen's shrill voice blasted through. Yes, I told you before, my neighbors are refusing inspections, they're dangerous, they've threatened me, and now they're mocking me. You need to send officers right now. Sarah let her speak, typing every word, logging every exaggeration. Ma'am, can you confirm? You said they threatened you. In what way? Karen faltered for just a second. They threatened me with their attitude. With their tone. You could hear it. It was intimidating. I almost choked trying not to laugh. Intimidating tone? That was her evidence? Sarah's fingers tapped the keyboard, recording every detail. Her voice remained steady. Ma'am, threatening someone with tone is not a crime. You were warned previously about false reports. Are you aware of that? Karen's voice shot up an octave. You don't understand. These people are criminals. You need to arrest them before they destroy everything. And that was it. That was the moment Karen sealed her fate. Because as Sarah logged the call, she added the note that would change everything. Repeat misuse of emergency services. Within 20 minutes, those same patrol cars rolled down our street again. But this time there was no calm warning in their posture. This time there was purpose. Karen ran to meet them, frantic, waving her arms. Officers. Thank goodness. They're threatening me again. They're criminals. You have to make them open the door. The female officer held up her hand, stopping Karen mid-sentence. Ma'am. We already spoke with you earlier this week about this. Karen blinked, caught off guard. Yes, but this time it's worse. They were laughing at me. They were trying to intimidate me. The male officer's voice was stern, cutting through her theatrics like a blade. Ma'am, step over to the curb. Karen hesitated. What? No. You're supposed to be dealing with them. I said step over to the curb. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. Karen stumbled backward, sputtering. This is outrageous. I'm the HOA president. I demand you take action against these people. The female officer pulled out her notepad. Ma'am, you made another false report to 911. You were warned. You wasted department resources again. That is a criminal offense. Karen's jaw dropped. What? No. You can't arrest me. I was just doing my duty. I was protecting the neighborhood. The officers didn't argue. They didn't explain further. They didn't indulge her fantasy of authority. The male officer simply reached for his cuffs. Ma'am, turn around. Hands behind your back. The sound that came out of Karen was something between a shriek and a gasp. You can't do this. Do you know who I am? I'll sue you. I'll sue the department. I'll sue the city. Click. The cuffs locked around her wrists. From our porch, I watched the entire scene unfold. For the first time in months, I felt the knot of tension in my chest unravel. Sarah stood beside me, her arms folded, her face calm but satisfied. Karen kicked, she twisted, she shouted every empty threat in the book. But the officers didn't flinch. They guided her firmly toward the patrol car. Her sunglasses fell off in the struggle, landing in the gutter. Her clipboard dropped to the pavement, papers scattering like defeated confetti. The female officer picked up the clipboard, glanced at the ridiculous notes, and tucked it under her arm as evidence. As Karen was lowered into the back seat of the cruiser, she screamed through the open window. "This isn't over. You'll regret this. I'll make sure you're all punished." But the door slammed shut, muffling her rage into silence. And just like that, she was gone. The patrol cars pulled away, their lights flickering once as if to signal the end of the show. The street grew quiet. For the first time in a long time, truly quiet. Sarah exhaled slowly, then turned to me. "Well," she said, her tone light. "That was satisfying." I laughed, shaking my head. "You planned this, didn't you?" She smirked. "Of course I did. You don't let someone like Karen push you around. You let them push themselves off the cliff." I wrapped an arm around her shoulder as we stood there, watching the last glimmer of the patrol lights fade. She really thought she could use 911 as her personal weapon. "And now," Sarah replied, "she knows what happens when you abuse the system." In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, peaceful. Karen was gone, banned from her HOA position, facing charges for false reporting, and from what we heard, spending more time in courtrooms than on sidewalks. Neighbors who had once kept their heads down began stopping by to thank us. They shared their own stories, their own run-ins with her. And slowly, the fear that had hung over our street dissolved. For the first time, our home actually felt like home. And every time I think back to that day, the day Karen called 911 to break into our house, I remember the irony. She thought she was summoning the law to fight for her. But in the end, she summoned the law against herself. And all it took was my wife answering the call. And that's how Karen's game finally ended, with her own arrest. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more.